Let's get into viewers' questions. Doing another deep dive into Cheltenham, days 3 and 4. In terms of placing bets, selection-wise, how would you approach the festival?
Win or lose, there's still 3 more days to go.
Ryanair Chase, Stayers Hurdle, Pertemps Handicap Hurdle, Festival Plate Handicap Chase, JCB Triumph Hurdle,
Bartlett Novices Hurdle.
the big one then, the Gold Cup, St James's Place Hunters Chase. When do we start thinking about the ground?
Position, Annie Power at the last flies down! Annie Power has gone but in front of the last left, Melody Light.
Try the first time, they're running up towards the finish, and he's mistaken the winning post. He's mistaken the winning post completely, Roger Lockwood, and Hoyt Troy.
From Archibald, Hardy is best, defends his title, and Archibald is flattened out in second. Then in third, and White is beginning to move. He's drifting off the tree line, Pertemps fire, and this was Timmy home. Springs the gun, gonna win his 4th Betfair Chase, and Cordo Star is still the king. Cordo Star wins.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tailed Off number 7. This is a no-holds-barred podcast that dives headfirst into the wonderfully weird world of horse racing. For the curious newbies like me or those looking to sharpen their skills, we've got you covered through it all. So today, guys, we're doing another deep dive into Cheltenham. So we're doing days 3 and 4. Right, let's get on to the viewer's question then. So I've had a really good question for George, and it's very on topic, so we thought we'd cover it today. So, guys, in terms of placing bets, selection-wise, how would you approach the festival, Cheltenham Festival? Would you just be laying singles on each horse and taking it race by race, or do you go for double, trebles, and accumulator bets? So maybe if I start with UL, how would you go about it?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a combination. If I'm honest, just one point of correction, just so we're clear what we're talking about. Laying is obviously when you go on the exchanges like Betfair Exchange and you basically become the bookie and back a horse to lose. So you lay. That's what's called laying. So I know that terminology is often confused with kind of backing horses, but I assume what George is on about is actually kind of what
backing,
would
I think.
Backing. Yeah. I think it's a bit of both. I mean, obviously everybody loves the big time results, and you're likely to get them much more from a multiple, whether that be a double, treble, or 4+ selections. I think probably a trap that people fall into, and I know we've done one on this podcast, is basically just go through, let's say, the top 10 favourites in the festival and just perm them all in a massive acca. Because, I mean, Duncan, I think you've landed a couple over the years, but how many times does one let you down?
I promise you now, it's day 4. Day 4 is the one that gets you. Get 3 of the first 4 in. I always put a 4-fold on the Friday. The first 3 will come in, as Elle will tell you. In the last few years, I've been done with the last one, and it's normally Elle's selection will be the one that does me.
So it's your fault, El.
Yeah, basically all Elle's fault.
Because you lack racing knowledge. That's why.
But yeah, I would say that you should take each individual horse on the price that it is for that race, and whether you value that as a good price or not. Because let's be honest, with anti-post betting now that we're so close to the races, all the information is in the market. We know pretty much who's going to what race. All the trials have done. There isn't really any margin or value in the market, certainly right towards the top end. And actually, some of the favourites are probably shorter than they would be on the day. We discussed Kopek de Boards last week. You know, he's likely to be odds against slightly for the day itself, but he's odds on at the minute. So if you were putting that one and another odds on and you're multiplying them together, you're actually multiplying bad value against bad value. So from a pure price perspective, it's probably not worth doing that at this stage. If you were really optimistic and were doing them in November, and you're sitting on horses that are going to be favourite for the races, then obviously that's worked in your favour. So yeah, take each individual price on its own merits. And yeah, I would just say from an anti-post perspective, it's probably a time now where we just sort of wait closer to the time when we got the declarations, and then you can probably start multiplying them once you know what's running.
Yeah, nice. And the decks are out when? Usually, 3 or 4 days before?
Yeah, so they thankfully moved to 48-hour declarations a few years ago. It used to be 24 hours. So you'd literally be starting the Tuesday, and then you'd know who's running Wednesday, whether you're kind of at the racecourse on the Tuesday. So at least on Sunday we get Tuesdays, and then on Monday we get Wednesdays. So before we start, we get at least the first 2 days locked and loaded.
Yeah.
Which is helpful.
Nice. And Duncan, did you add anything onto that?
Says is absolutely right. I mean, I think I'm trying to think what the actual phrase is, but it's basically singles make you profit. So I think not mug punters, but maybe people who don't punt often, and like Al said, they kind of want the big, the big payout. They see all these massive numbers on screen and think, oh my god, I could win £1,000,000 here or 100 grand, whatever it is. They'll be the kind of people that are bookies' wet dream, basically. If they're just putting those kinds of bets on, the chances of them coming in are so small, the bookies will just take their money all day long. But if you put individual bets on each of them first, depending on prices, you're more likely to be in profit in the long term. So always bet singles for long-term profit. Your ACCAs and fourfolds, threefolds, whatever it is, they're your kind of ones for a nice, a rainy day kind of fund. Have a bit of a laugh with, but don't expect to go out and win every time that they come in. When it comes to ACCAs, though, especially with the festival, like Al said, you've got in the main big races that are out there, you've got some really short price favourites in there, and ones we've kind of put up as our fancies for this, and the Muggy Accas we've done. I don't think I'd have a single on some of those ones at short prices unless they kind of moved out to a more decent price, like an even money kind of price, because some of them are odds on. So you then I might get to a point where I'll put two of them into a double to pay for, because I'm confident on them, to pay for at least an even money or more than an even money. But it's not always the best way of doing it. I would definitely say singles are the way forward before anything else.
I just thought of probably to help that question around multiples is that I think the bookies over the years have come up with ways to market the multiples because they're probably a bit confusing to the once a year, twice a year punter, and they'll have things like patents, lucky fins, lucky 69, and it's not lucky 69. As you go up the selections, they kind of lucky. I can't remember what the next one up. I don't do them. That's why I don't know them. Lucky. What's the next one up from lucky 15?
31.
Lucky. Right. Okay. So those sorts of bets. Basically, you put it to whatever your stake is goes on all the permutations. So it does this, like let's say it's to £1. You do a quid singles, quid doubles, quid trebles, and depending on how many permutations you've got. Whereas I would just say, if you fancy doing something like that, just make your own. It's quite easy on the online apps now. Have your singles as your stake, as Duncan said. That's how you're going to make your money, because all you need is one to win to cover your bet. Then I would just gradually reduce your stake as you go up the multiples. So for a double, maybe half it, treble, a third of it, and then for whatever it is, a fourfold or fivefold. Have something that just basically is called a cover bet. So just in case you strike gold, you've got it. But you don't need to have your top stake across all the divisions of the multiple, because that makes it quite an expensive bet. And then if a couple go down, you've got nothing to show for it. So that's my other bit of advice on that.
The other point that I wanted to add to this that George has mentioned, because obviously there are a lot of people that go on the actual physical days there, but most people will be betting online. For us who are going, this is potentially one of the only festivals, and one of the only race days. I've started to do this more often now, because the terms you will get on course are literally going to be pretty much 3 places, and they're not going to be best odds guaranteed. Everything that the bookies online offer, there is so much more incentive for you to bet online, because you will get better place odds, like for certain races, you'll probably get, depending on how many runners there are in the first, you might get 4 places. On course, you're probably only going to get 3. They'll have, for example, Bet365 or Ladbrokes, companies like that, they do best odds guaranteed on the day of the races. So if you back a horse at a price and actually it drifts and goes off at a bigger price, you will get that price when the SP comes in, if that's what it comes in at. You don't get that if you go to a bookie. So if you go to a bookie on course, bet at 4-1, it goes off 5-1. You're not going to go back there and say, "Can I have the 5-1 then, please?" I'll just tell you to bugger off. So it's probably one of the only times I don't think I'm going to back much on course at the festival. I think most of my betting is going to be done online.
And I'd also say just have fun. For most of us, it's not a living, and also do it responsibly. Gamble is gambling, unfortunately, but do it responsibly, and do whatever you can afford to lose, which is the main thing. So,
Number one rule.
Yeah. Number 1 rule. Right, let's get on to Cheltenham then. We've got day 3, the Thursday, and day 4, the Friday. So let's start with the Ryanair chase on day 3. Elle, who are you thinking? You got a few picks here?
Yeah, probably just talking about a few different horses, because at the moment it's a little bit guesswork in terms of who's actually going to turn up. We've kind of alluded to that along the way so far this kind of podcast season. I think top of the market, Factor File, he still isn't a guaranteed runner. He's still very much in the betting for the Gold Cup. He's obviously been aimed as a 3-miler this season. He won the 3-mile novice last season, the Brown Advisory at the festival. So it all seemed like, he was being aimed to be a Gold Cup horse. Having won his reappearance nicely in the John Durkan, which is over 2.5 miles, beating Galopin des Champs, he's then been firmly put in his place over 2 races at Leopardstown over 3 miles, where The one at Christmas, he just looked a bit too keen and didn't jump brilliantly. He looked a lot better the last day in the Dublin Racing Festival. But for me, after the last, he just emptied and Gallopin pulled away, and then Grange Clare West even managed to do him for second place. So it just screams to me that he just doesn't have bottomless stamina that you would need to win a 3-mile race, and then you add in another 2.5 furlongs to win a Gold Cup. So it seems to me that he really should run here, and he's currently about, well, he's 11 to 8 if you want to go non-run, no bet, but he's kind of 7 to 4 if you take the anti-post, which could look like a good price on the day, which seems pretty skinny, but I think there's quite a few that aren't going to turn up here. We spoke about Gaelic Warrior, still could go for the Champion Chase. Ile Francais probably goes here, but again could go for the Champion Chase. Banbridge goes to the Gold Cup. And then beyond that, you're kind of scratching around for other runners. Al Fabiolo still hasn't reappeared since his tip up at the DRF, so you start taking all of those horses out of the top of the market and you're looking at an even money shot and potentially even shorter. So I have to say he's the most likely winner because he's progressive. He's an 8-year-old, which is kind of the peak age for a chaser, sort of 7, 8 and 9 at the kind of key ages to start showing the best. And he's obviously won at Cheltenham before. He was pretty good in the Brown Advisory last year, even though it was kind of a weak renewal. So I have to say, even though he's favourite, he just seems like the most likely winner. And then I thought, well, I'll have a look to see, is there something we could put up each way? Last year's winner, Protectorat, obviously destroyed them at Windsor and beaten a nice horse in Jello, who obviously came out and won the Denman next time at Newbury. He is a 10-year-old, but he was pretty good in the race last year. You could see him hitting the frame. But the one I'm going to say each way, and I did mention it a couple of weeks ago after we reviewed the Newbury races, a horse that won the Game Spirit Chase over 2 miles, is a horse called Master Chewy of good old Nigel Twiston-Davis's. He's available at 40 to 1 for this anti-post, and if you go back through his form, he wasn't much of a hurdler, definitely has become a better chaser. He was actually still going okay in the Arkle Novices Chase at the festival last year before tipping up 2 out, and I think they've realised, having kept him at 2 miles this season, he just gets outpaced, and then he comes on a little bit and stays on towards the end. And that was very much the case last time when Sam got off him at Newbury. He just said he was flat out, and if he'd missed a fence, he would have had no chance, and he needed every yard to get up and win that day. So the extra half a mile here looks like a good option. Given that so many at the top are definitely going to come out of this race, a horse that's absolutely guaranteed to run in it will appreciate the step up in trip. Has a few pounds to find, but that could make the difference. I wouldn't put you off. Master Chewy, 40 to 1 each way.
Yeah, lovely. And sorry, how long is the distance of the Ryanair Chase? What was it?
This is 2.5 miles.
2.5, okay.
So for anyone that doesn't know, so this race was only invented when they turned Cheltenham from 3 days into 4 days, and people of my dad's generation are still haven't gotten over it, because it was in its purest form as 3 days. You had much less racing and much more kind of quality. When they obviously fatted it out to 4 days, they needed to fill some gaps, and you've got the Champion Chase, which is 2 miles, the Gold Cup, which is 3 miles too, and they decided that there was an opportunity to squeeze a race at championship level in between. But what you get is this situation here, where you go down the top sort of 7 or 8 in the betting, and you go, well, a few of them could drop down to the Champion Chase, a few of them could step up to the Gold Cup, and whatever's left is kind of horses that are just taking the easy option. So it's a bit unsatisfactory, really, and I kind of wish it didn't exist at the festival, sadly.
Okay, interesting. Duncan, see, you got Factor File as well?
Yeah, Factor File, I think it'd be, as El said, I don't think the Gold Cup is the right race. I just think distance-wise, the horse just doesn't stay, and he's proven 2.5 miles would be, I think, ideal, especially with, if he can just about get 3 miles, 2.5 mile up with the Cheltenham Hill, I think is a great little stamina test for him. So, the price is there, and as Al said, with the horses that are still in there but may disappear from the market, and like Banbridge and potentially Ile Francais, etc., I could see him going off odds on if they do decide to send him here. I think JP might really want to send him to the Gold Cup to have one last crack at Gallopin, but I think personally that would be the wrong decision. If he wants a good opportunity to win a race, this is the ideal shout for him. Yeah, okay. But again, I feel like I've certainly been putting up favourites from these. I did have a look at the each way options as well, and this one is roguish, but I mean not necessarily for me. It's a bit of a stalwart of the Cheltenham Festival in Envoy Allen, who's 11 years old now. But his festival record is unbelievable. So his form figures at the festival are 1-1, fall, 3-1-2. So he's a 20 or 25 to 1 shot at the moment for this non-runner, no bet. And I think that, still that reads fantastically well for a horse that could well hit the frame. He lost out by 4 lengths, I think, last year to Protectorat, who won. You could still see him finishing in the frame quite comfortably. I think even at 11 years old, he won a Grade 1 late last year anyway. So I think he's still clearly got the ability there. And he'll have been trained with this, obviously, in mind again. Yeah. So, yeah, I think at 20s, a non-runner, no bet is a good bet.
Worth an outside bet, yep.
Shout out to Toby, who thinks Envoy Allen is a myth. And what has he won? 3 races at the Cheltenham Festival. He's a multiple Grade 1 winner. If that's a myth, then God knows.
Toby, the elusive Toby that he's yet to come on the podcast. Right, let's get on to Stayers Hurdle then. Elliot, what are we saying in this race?
Yeah, I feel like there's a few uninspiring races this year at the festival.
You're really making me excited, mate, I tell you.
Yeah, it's going to say, to the people.
Call a spade. You've kind of just got one at the top and then nothing. No, it seems like
I do agree. This the Thursday, I think, is probably one of the worst days of the lot, but just because it's, like you say, the top championship race really isn't a championship race.
Yeah, but you've got the Ryanair, which shouldn't be a championship race. I mean, it's not really, and then you've got the Stayers, which is kind of the weakest of all the divisions. But sometimes you can have a good Stayers because it's kind of just an average bunch, but it's competitive. Whereas this year, you've got last year's winner, Tiapu, and I'm thinking, well, I've never really warmed to the horse, never really liked him. He's always very lightly raced, so they've kind of figured out that the way to get the best out of him is just to not race him very much and save him for the big days. And he kind of pops up early season and then gets put away for the whole winter, autumn and winter time, and then he's saved for the spring. But kind of if you look at his form really since he stepped up to 3 miles 2 years ago, he was favourite for this race and probably should have won it. David Russell was riding while injured and he didn't have the best of times trying to get some horses home, so you could probably forgive him that. And he was pretty good in winning it last year off pretty much the exact same preparation that he's had this year, and then he followed up at Punchestown to prove that kind of wasn't a fluke. He was beaten in the same race that he won last year by Lossiemouth, but he would have just been done for toe. I wouldn't read into that too much, and he's clearly just been primed for the race. And you think, well, nothing towards the top of the market I could see contending him. Home by the Lee has run in this race, I think it's 3 times, and has been beaten every year. So I can't really see why he's going to suddenly do it this year. As a lucky place, is interesting stepping up in 3 to 3 miles because he's kind of a younger one and unexposed is the term that we use. But I'm not convinced he will definitely stay, if I'm honest. And he's going to have Noodle Nico on him for good measure. The Wall Park's probably going to go to the Pertemps. Gower Road really shouldn't be good enough, but then we said that last time. So then I was kind of looking down and thinking, what could I sort of put up each way? Because I don't want to, I say Tuapu will probably go and win it. But one I landed on each way was just one that I hadn't really looked at much before. He's only a 5-year-old, which is almost unheard of for a championship race because they tend to be only novices at 5, let alone running in Grade 1 open races. But Rocky's Diamond is currently 16 to 1. Non-run, no bet. I think you can get 20s if you go anti-post. But he's quite an improver. I mean, basically the only reason why he's running in open company is because towards the back end of his 4-year-old season he won a maiden hurdle, so that means he kind of lost his novice status. Right. He then reappeared in the autumn and won a 3-mile handicap hurdle pretty nicely, and then actually massively outrun his 66 to 1 odds when he ran in the 3-mile Savills hurdle, which is kind of a Grade 1 3-mile hurdle at Leopardstown over Christmas, and he was actually kind of denied a clear run coming towards the last, and Home by the Lead did win that quite comfortably. But then he came back out and proved that wasn't a one-off and won the Grade 2 Galmoy hurdle, and he won it pretty nicely at Gowran Park in January. And yeah, I think around 16-20 to 1. He's a 5-year-old, he's untapped potential. I mean, Cheltenham will be another kettle of fish altogether, but
yeah.
Worth
an outsider though. Worth an outsider. Duncan, what have you got in this one?
Yeah, boring again, unfortunately.
Boring.
Yeah, it is. Tiapu is the most obvious one there. Yeah. By far the classiest horse that is entered in the race. Did make a note of lucky place. I just thought he was interesting. Stepping up in trip, having he came 4th in the Coral Cup last year. I think the step up in trip could actually suit. So I don't necessarily the step up in trip is a bad thing. Nico de Boinville on board potentially could be. Hopefully not, but we'll see. It's in a skinny enough price for me as it is. So then I was looking again elsewhere.
No one, no bet, Duncan. Those.
Yeah. And then the other one I looked at again further down was Langadan. Now, we know that this horse was kind of messed around with for 2 years previous at the Coral Cup and has won both times off a mark of 141. He now no longer gets that. He's now running off of mark of 160. He's entered into the
158.
Coral Cup. But I think at that weight, he'll be carrying top weight. I don't think he can really go there and do that again, carrying another 14 pounds than he did last year. So I think he was also then entered into this, into the stayers. So it'll be a step up in trip for him. But I think he does have the class to kind of, do well or be competitive. I can't tell. Well, if you give me 1 second, I'll tell you what I can see from the price.
We get back to us on that one.
20 to 1. So I've just had a quick scan.
Nice.
So I think that's a decent price for Langadan at 20s for the stayers. But just make sure you go non-run and no bet in case for some reason they do send him down the Coral Cup route.
So
I'm on him at 25s, I think.
What a star!
kept that quiet. Tiapu's obviously the fav,
Never
and then you've got a couple of outsiders. So there you go. Okay. Let's get on to the Pertemps handicap hurdle. Duncan, should we start with you?
Had a quick gander through this one this evening, and I actually can't believe I'm going to say this because we've been slating Paul Nicholls on this probably since the day we started the podcast, and I've actually had a look through, and I've actually picked out his runner Henry II, which I never thought I would be doing, but he's got a very similar profile. So he had a horse that won this last year called Montmoral off I think it was mark of 138. And Henry II is in this at 134. He won his Pertemps qualifier at Sandown. It was on heavy ground, but he absolutely bolted in by 18 lengths. He's very likely a race for an 8-year-old. Say again?
I was there. I remember it.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I mean, off of I think 10 stone 10, he'll be carrying off a rating of 134, which is very similar to how they did with Montmoral last year. I just think he's really lightly raced as well. So very unexposed at the trip. So I think he could be a decent little bet. I think he was 16 to 1, non-runner, no bet. That would be my selection thus far for the Pertemps. Not a favourite.
What would you say, Elliot?
I say well done, Butters. There, it's nice to see some variance.
There we go. Got to be done.
I've actually probably swapped places with Duncan because I've gone to the top of the market. But this is a horse that I had in mind for this race long before he was kind of, second favourite at the minute, a horse called Jericho de Repine. Also, we must say that JP McManus has got this festival on absolute strings because he's got pretty much the favourites for half the races, I think, at the minute, the way it's going. He's also got the actual favourite for this, the Wall Park, trained by Gordon Elliott. But I think Jericho de Repine, it wouldn't be really like Hendo to be kind of sneaking around and doing handicap plots and stuff. But he has won this race before, and he's won a fair few Coral Cups, so he knows what it takes to get one lined up for a handicap. And especially if they're owned by JP McManus, you kind of get a bit of a steer from above on what to do with certain horses. He was an interesting horse. Last season he was quite a good novice. He won the Grade 2 novice trial at Donny. I always forget what that... Oh, the River Don. And then was going to the festival, and I actually quite fancied him for the festival. But little did we know going into last year's festival that Henderson's horses were basically falling. The wheels were falling off left, right and centre. So this, he ran in the Supreme but had no chance. And then, things have obviously got a lot better for Henderson since then, and he was supposed to be a chaser this season. But he made a right mockery of his chasing debut at Sandown. He actually delayed the race by 10 minutes because they had to resaddle him. They couldn't get the saddle back on him. He was playing the Mickey, basically. Oh. Then ballooned a couple of fences, and Nico ended up pulling him up in the end. And so the whole chasing plan was shelved, and he was sent back over hurdles. But because he'd been a 2-miler, they started off in a race like the Jerry Filden, which is a really good handicap 2-mile handicap hurdle over at Newbury. But really, he started to be quite obvious that he probably wanted to step up in trip. He had a little break around Christmas and then came back to the key thing for the Pertemps, we probably should mention, is that it's the only race really at Cheltenham which is a kind of a series where you have qualification races throughout the season. And going a long way back, this race, you used to just have to enter into one of the qualification races, and that counted as a qualification. Right. Then they said that was a little bit too loose because of skullduggery was going on. And then they said, no, okay, you have to finish in the top 6 in one of these races. But bear in mind the distance in any given race between 1st and 6th is quite a long way. Yeah. So you would basically see the weirdest thing ever, which was a race for 6th. Because if you were 7th, you couldn't get in, but you didn't want to be too close. So it was kind of everybody just sort of shuffling around for 6th, and it kind of made it, again, a bit of a mockery. So then they were like, no, this year, I think, is it the first year or was it maybe last year? Sorry?
It's the first
no, but I'm saying, when did that come in? Was that?
Oh, right, okay. I think was it this year?
Could have been this year, but they've made it the first 4 now. So basically, in all these qualification races, and they start in kind of late October all the way through to, we just had a couple last weekend, you have to finish in the first 4 of them otherwise you don't get into this race. So it makes it a little bit kind of quirky. And because of that, Jericho de Repene ran in a qualifier at Exeter around February time. Nico was thinking, yeah, I don't want to get there too soon, chilling away. And then there was actually a bit of, so there's some horses that don't want to be kind of, I just want to finish fourth and I'll take that and go goodbye. They actually need to win or do well to go up in the handicap to even have a chance of getting into the weights for the race.
Right.
So then there was a bit of a scramble on, and then Nico got a bit busy on him, popped the last, and then realised he was going to finish third or fourth, and then was so easy on him. And it was his first go over 3 miles, and I'm pretty sweet on this horse. He's qualified for the race. The good thing is the weights came out today, so that we can see that he's number 15 on the list. So he's definitely going to get a run off a mark of 135, and as Duncan said, 10 stone 11. He's 7-1 currently. I wouldn't put you off that. I can see him being 7-2, 4-1 on the day. And I am quite sweet on him.
Yeah, nice.
It sounds like multiple cherries on this one.
Yeah, this must be a 5 cherry.
You can't have 5 cherries in the Pertemps. That is mental.
Nonsense. Of course you can.
All right, 4.9.
Yeah, 4.9.
4.9 cherries. We've never had a 0.9 cherry before. Right. Let's get on to the last one then on Thursday. So the Festival Plate Handicap Chase. Elliot, you have a few notes?
Yeah, the Nichols fever's catching because I've gone for a Paul Nichols horse.
You're going back on all your principles, guys.
I know.
It's like a reckoning.
You've got to be objective. You can't be emotional in this great game. Yeah, to be honest, I was watching. So I've told you last week that they're doing like stable tours at the minute. All the press are going to all the yards, and Nichols' was on Twitter, and I thought I'll watch this for a bit of banter, see what he's talking about. And he mentioned also, I thought, okay, that's a fair point. I hadn't really considered that because I just assumed he might have been going for one of the Grade 1s. And there's a horse in this, so this is a 2.5 mile handicap chase and on the Thursday. And he mentioned a horse called Ginny's Destiny, which I have to say has been, he's not had the best of seasons, but he was a really decent horse last season. He was really progressive and went really close to winning at the festival last season, finishing second in the Turners, which doesn't exist anymore, to Grey Dawning, and then was second in another Grade 1 at Aintree. And then you think coming into this season, okay, he's going to be one of the ones to follow in these big races, but things just haven't gone to plan for him, and he hasn't really looked the same horse. But as a result, his handicap mark has dropped £6 since the start of the season. And he's won at Cheltenham before in a novices handicap last January on Trials Day, off a mark just £2 lower than what he's going to run off on the Thursday at Cheltenham. So he's going to run off 149. And Nichols was so sweet on him, saying that he's really turned a corner. And, if he gets a bit of better ground, which you kind of hope we would get by the time we get to Cheltenham. I just think at 25-1, he's definitely obviously going to get in the race. He likes the course. You have got to get over his poor season so far, but he's now in a race where he has much more of a chance to do his best. So yeah, 25-1.
Nichols' comments. Weirdly, his Cheltenham group just kind of popped up on the phone. So I thought, I'll have a read of this and see what he says about Ginny's Destiny. And he said after last year's, Cheltenham like finishing second in the Turners and then going on to the Aintree, he's like, it took him so long to kind of get him back to where he was. But he's now said he's coming back to himself, and I'm very happy with where he is now.
I mean, they all say that. They
could be a good bet there, Al.
They all say that. They're all the same.
Load the cannons is what I just heard.
Load the cannons.
5 cherries deep as well.
5 cherries. Right. Okay. So that's been Thursday then. So let's get on to the last day 4 on Friday, 14th of March. So JCB Triumph Hurdle. Duncan, should we start with you?
Yeah, this is the one I think I've been banging on about for so long.
Banging on about.
Podcast. Just every time there seems to be a race that's been leading to this.
It's been leading to this moment.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we've got the top 2 in the market with East India Dock and Lulamba. Lulamba was clear favourite a couple of weeks ago. But then Lulamba was entered to go to the Adonis at the weekend, but then was pulled out by Hendo the day before. Whether or not that's contributed to the slight drift in the market now for the horse, I don't know. But it's good to see that you've got kind of two favourites there now, at 2-1 apiece, which is good. I'm not backing either one of them at this stage. The one I have backed anti-post was Hello Neighbour, which is Gavin Cromwell's horse. So it's run twice, won twice. I'm on at 12's anti-post. I think it's now best price maybe 11-2. So he won most recently in the Grade 1 at the DRF. Where he has beaten a couple of these that are going to reoppose him, that are going to come over from Ireland. But Yeah, that's what I'm on so far. And as I said, I've already cashed out on the Mondo Man bet, which was a load of rubbish anyway. If you had to put a gun to my head and say which is the top two may go maybe best, I'd probably go with East India Doc, just because he's been to Cheltenham twice, won twice, so convincingly, and both in Grade Twos. Just think it might give him the edge in terms of the fact that been there and done it, got the T-shirt, so we know he likes the track. But yeah, we'll see what prices they are on the day, because it would be nice to have something else to go with it. But East India Doc at the moment would probably shave it for me out of that. But Hello Neighbour
And
12.
what cherries are we saying on Hello Neighbour?
No, nothing major on that. So I would probably just say like 2 or 3 cherries. It's nothing big.
2 or 3 cherries. Nice conservative
Yeah,
cherry.
I don't think you really can be in the JCB, because you have so little form to go on unless you've seen something that is out of this world. I don't think you can really be overly confident on anything there.
Okay.
But there's definitely
Elliot,
some good horses.
you had another Gibbs Island, was it? Another tip?
Don't spoil it.
Sorry.
No, I'm very.
Elliot, so you had something else, didn't you? What was it?
I can't wait to hear this.
Guess.
No. I also like East India Doc. I think it's unusual to have the British horses towards the top of the market for this race. It's a race that the Irish have dominated in recent seasons. I have to say that Hello Neighbour, yeah, fair enough, deserves to be a single figure price, but I just think that we've seen nothing come out of Ireland this season, which is quite unusual. And I must admit, I really thought everyone would have jumped on the Lalamba wagon a bit more. I do wonder whether Mando Man's sort of poor performance at the weekend has let the form down. But then some of the other horses he beat, like St Pancras and Vianney, have come out and won. So you have to respect Lalamba. I've just been so sweet on East India Doc, because over the years, I think a few more years ago, I'd have got sucked into the kind of sexy ones that lightly raced, big stable, everybody's talking about. But actually, substance is much more important, the form in the book. And a horse like East India Doc is rock solid. He's much more experienced, so he's had obviously runs from the flat, and he's won 3 times over hurdles, twice at Cheltenham. And interestingly, I was looking at the RPR, so the Racing Post ratings for their performances, and the mark that Lou Lambert got at Ascot was 132. That's the same mark that East India Doc recorded with his first victory at Cheltenham in November. But then when he ran on trials day, when I was fortunate enough to be there, he significantly improved on that, and the Racing Post gave him a mark of 143. All that performance, he absolutely stormed clear up the hill, and he won a Grade 2 quite comfortably. And he might not have beaten much that day, but I think the fact he's run 3 times over hurdles, he's been to Cheltenham twice, he's just rock solid, and around 2 to 1 would be a fair enough price on the day. So I do quite like him, but I was surprised to see that he's almost shade in terms of being favourite. I thought everyone would pile in on Lulamba. So if you can get around 2 to 1 on the day, I'd be pretty happy with that. But yes, as you said, I thought, let me see if I can find something other than the obvious ones each way. And actually, it's one I've actually backed myself today, because I quite liked Gibbs Island, trained by Tom Lacey. He's an interesting one. He has had a lot of runs on the flat, which you start to worry about, because if they've been running a lot as a 2-year-old and 3-year-old, have they potentially hit their peak too early in their career? But he seems to have been transformed, turned into hurdles. It wasn't a bad flat horse. He was trained in Ireland, and he was rated 84, which is a fairly decent level. And he just ran in quite an ordinary juvenile hurdle up at Sedgefield in January, but managed to beat an odds-on shot that day called Surrey Bell, who then went out and won his next 2 starts, and he then went into a Class 2 race at Haydock called the Victor Lodorian, which is always a fairly decent trial for the Triumph, the Saturday before last, and he just jumped and travelled all over them, and he won pretty comfortably. So I was thinking, there isn't much else at the top of the market that I like, and a sort of 16, 20 to 1 is another each way bet worth a swing.
Nice little outsider. Thanks, Al. Sorry for ruining the surprise. Right, let's get on to the next one then. Albert Bartlett.
What's that?
Elliot, should we start with you?
Can you tell me what it is then?
Tell you what it is then. Albert Bartlett.
What kind of vegetable?
What do you mean?
They're a famous brand of something.
What, Albert Bartlett?
Yeah. You'd have them on your roast dinner.
You say vegetable?
Yeah.
Broccoli? Carrot?
Keep pressing and guessing.
Roast potatoes, mate. That's what I was trying to lead
Roast
you
potatoes?
towards. Spuds, yeah.
Mate, I only know Aunt Bessie's.
Frozen.
It would not work well, would it, if this was called Aunt Bessie's?
My wife is very lucky when I do the roast dinner, right? Let's get into it then.
This Full title of this race is the Albert Bartlett Novices Hurdle. It's not just called Albert Bartlett. It's not just some guy, but he is actually quite a prominent race owner. He's the owner of Banbridge. If you ever see those colours, that's who sponsors this race. It's an interesting race. So 3 mile for novices. You can get quite a lot of shocks in this race. We saw that last year with Stella Story winning it. I think he was 33-1 for the race. We've seen many horses win it at big prices over the years. So looking at the top of the market, I was kind of thinking, do I really want to get stuck into yellow clay? Even though he has done probably the most consistent form this season. He's been kind of obviously running in better races, graded races, and was pretty comfortable in the Lawlers and Ace. But he's never actually raced over 3 miles. He is by Yates, who obviously gets a lot of stamina into horses and probably would stay, but there's enough doubt there. So I thought, I'd probably have a little look elsewhere. I am actually on Jasmine DeVoe at 33-1, Willie's horse, because he's just jumped like an absolute wardrobe over hurdles so far this season. He obviously won the champion bumper at the festival last season, and everyone thought he was going to be a superstar over hurdles. And they started him off around 2 miles, but clearly stamina is his bag. He's still available at around 16s, 20-1, so I wouldn't put you off. And I was tempted to put him up as my each way selection, but I think there are horses of a similar price that have much more solid credentials. He's just kind of, he's got a reputation because he won the champion bumper, but he can't jump hurdles, and that's quite important in this race.
Quite crucial skill to have. Yeah.
He can't just walk through them like he's trying to do at the moment. So then there was 2 that I actually thought, well, do you know what? I think both of these should be going for the race. They're kind of decent prices, so let me just put up a couple of swingers and see if we can get another shock in this race for this year. So first one I'll talk about is Jet Blue, owned by the enigmatic Caroline Tisdall. If you ever see the green and gold colours, she's the joint owner of Final Demand that Willie's got for the Turners. This horse was pretty decent in France and was actually third in a Grade 1 bumper before starting to go over hurdles, and then was switched, I'm assuming, when she bought the horse, and switched to David Cottan. And then the horse had its first start for the trainer at Cheltenham, which I always say, when you go into the festival with good horses in big races, the ones that have got the proven Cheltenham form worth the weight in gold, because it is a difficult track, and if you're sort of weighing up between 2 horses, and you've got one that's proven it at Cheltenham, I just think always side with that sort of horse, to be honest. And he ran over course and distance in a Grade 2 novices hurdle in December, and he kind of bolted up. And a horse that was well beaten in third, called Yellow Car, has come out and won a Grade 2 himself next time, so the form has some substance. I'd be a little bit disappointed that he hasn't run him since, but to be honest, he's gone well fresh before, so I wouldn't put me off. And as I say, he's around 16-1, so Jet Blue is one of them. And then another one I'll take a swing at is Wendigo for Jamie Snowden. He ran...
Maybe.
Go on, Jamie.
Maybe.
Still waiting for that call. He ran behind the New Lion in the Grade 1 shallow hurdle around Christmas time, which obviously, the New Lion's one of the favourites for the Turners and the Supremes, so, really, really strong form. He then went and found a really, really weak race to run in at Wetherby a couple of weeks ago, but he's definitely going to go for this race. He hasn't raced over 3 miles, but has won a point-to-point over the trip, obviously, before, won a couple of soft ground bumpers. So, to me, I don't think stamina's going to be an issue, and he's around 20-1, so Wendigo and Jet Blue to hopefully cause a bit of an upset.
3 outsiders. Okay, thanks, El. Duncan, what do you have?
Yeah, I actually had one same as El here, Jet Blue.
Both on
for
Jet Blue.
exactly the reasons that El had mentioned. He romped home at Cheltenham in a Grade 2 in the Albert Bartlett trial in December. Ground versatile as well. I don't think there's anything not to like at 16s. I think it's a great bet at 16s. With shout out as well for Classic for the favourite, the Yellow Clay. I can understand why he's favourite. He's stepping up. Hasn't stepped up to 3 miles before, but I don't see that being any kind of an issue, as El mentioned, because he's from Cy Yates, who won the Ascot Gold Cup over 2 mile 4 on flat. So if this horse doesn't get 3 miles, there's something going wrong. But I think it appears that this is he's kind of double entered, but I think this is the preferred option for him. I think it's between that and the Turners.
I think he'll run here.
Say again?
He'll run here.
Yeah.
It's the easier option.
Yeah, I think from what I've read from Gordon is most likely that he'll run at this one. So I completely see why. I think he's a very, 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 very good looking horse, especially the way he won last time out on ground that I think they were pretty concerned about being quite ropey, but it's proven again that he's quite versatile. I mean, it said it was soft ground, but it looked borderline heavy when he last was turned out. Yeah, I think he's a worthwhile favourite, but at the prices, I would definitely chance on JetBlue.
Awesome. Good. Thanks, Duncan. Right, the big one then, the Gold Cup. So this is the main one, is it, the whole week?
Yeah, I'd say this is the main one of the whole season.
Yeah.
The whole season.
Forget the Grand National, forget
What's
everything
bigger?
else.
What's bigger than this or the Grand National?
This.
Yes.
It depends. If you're a racing fan and purist, this is the number one race.
Guilty.
If you are just kind of, well, if you were to say what's the most well-known race, the most popular, you'd say the Grand National.
Grand National, yeah.
But yeah, that isn't even worth talking about these days. All about the Gold Cup.
But we'll talk about it, won't we, on a special?
When we get there, yeah, we'll have something to talk about.
Right, go on then, Elliot. Gold Cup.
Yeah, as I say, having given it that billing, it's a little bit disappointing that this year, the closer we've got to the race, having at the start of the season, you could be thinking, oh, we could be in for a race for the ages. One by one, horses have either decided not to go here, had injury problems or whatever, and it is starting to look like a bit of a walkover for the dual champion Galopin de Champs. We know how good he is. We obviously reviewed his great win at the Dublin Racing Festival in the Irish Gold Cup. I think the biggest sadness really to this race is that there just isn't a real kind of solid alternative or someone
Challenger.
You know, you want a challenger for every great champion. You want him to have a rival to overcome. You don't want him to just turn up and win easily. So, you know, obviously I think this is the one that's going to win. He's probably one of the certainties of the festival, barring accident or injury. As I say, he's won the race 2 years on the spin. He will join a very illustrious shortlist of 3 other horses to have won it 3 times. The most recent of those was Best Mate at the turn of the century. He's just absolutely nothing to fault him. He's an absolute machine. He's at the peak of his powers at 9. I think nothing will get past him, to be honest. I did try and think about one each way. Banbridge is interesting, but I am still unsure if he definitely stays. Then we said Factfile probably won't run here. I know he appeared not to run that well last time out, and I might seem a little bit silly for saying this, but just on a pure price perspective, when Factfile comes out of this market and you know, some of the other outsiders don't turn up, there isn't going to be many runners. And Corbett's Cross at 20-1, I just think is an absolute knock in each way bet. You know, you're basically betting 4 to 1 a place, and I think that's a bit of a gift because he would have won at the last 2 Cheltenham Festivals. He basically had the Albert Bartlett sewn up before deciding to run through the wing rather than jump the last hurdle, which was absolutely mental. If you've ever seen a picture of that, it's crazy. So he would have had that race won. He then went and won, he made amends for that and won the National Hunt Chase over 3 miles 6.5 furlongs last season at the festivals. Clearly stamina isn't an issue, and if anything, that's his strength. In hindsight, I think they shouldn't have run him at Ascot the other day. It's quite close to the festival. He already came over for the King George, which would have been like literally, if you could have designed the opposite set of circumstances for him to show his best, the King George is that race. So he's come over for Christmas, had that race, then he's gone back to Ireland, and then he's come back over a few weeks before Cheltenham for the Ascot Chase, which again, as we discussed last week, was Pic Dory's, you know, sort of home match, and he just couldn't live with the pace of that race, and he just looked a little bit all at sea. Obviously his jumping needs to get a little bit better, but they'll go a little bit slower in this and he'll be able to get into a stride and gallop a bit more. I don't think he'll get close enough to Galopin de Champs, but looking at the field at the minute, I would be quite surprised if he couldn't at least get third, and at 20-1, you know, that's an each way steal in my opinion.
Yeah, nice. Okay, good way to think about it. You don't agree, Duncan?
There was a grimace there.
There's a couple of faces.
It was more that his jumping was so bad.
His jumping
at Ascot,
was bad.
and I think that's what kind of lets him down. And
But look at his jumping last year his jumping in the National Hunt Chase was pretty decent last season.
Yeah, but you were saying
again,
he's got to be
going from a National
about
Hunt Chase to the Gold Cup is a very, very big step up. You just can't make a mistake during it. If you do, you're gone.
Okay, give me 2 horses that finish ahead of him other than Galopin de Champs.
Who would finish ahead of him? I actually think
who
one of
finished
you,
second and third instead of him.
one of you actually mentioned on here was one I was quite interested in, which was the Grange Clare West. I think he goes there. Yeah, no, I think that's really decent. I think that's got a great chance, especially when you look at the DRF. When he finished very close up, was it 3rd or 4th when he finished in that?
He finished, wasn't he second?
Was he second? I thought he was. I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I thought he finished.
I just said that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that horse got a great chance. I think at the price.
Yeah. The only reason why, so I was looking earlier and I was thinking, right, I want to put one up each way. I've already backed Grange Clare West. That's the one I should talk about. But he's a lightly raced, fragile horse, never been to Cheltenham. Corbett's Cross has got the Cheltenham form in the book, and that was it.
He's battle hard. I'll give you that. But I'm talking about in terms of, yes, he could finish in the frame, but would he come close to trying and win it? No, I don't think. I think we've all said that.
Will.
But yeah, I mean, your winner is galloping the Champ all day long.
All right. Gold Cup.
All cherries on board.
All cherries on board. 5 cherries. Okay, let's do the last one then. St James's Place Hunter's Chase. Elliot, you had a little nibble.
Yeah, this is another one of my sneaky ones.
Doug's shaking his head again.
I
Why is
haven't
he
made my
shaking his
case yet. Let me make my case.
This is literally no. I don't mind.
Just stop watching now.
I don't mind your choice of what you picked. It's more the fact that you've even gone for this race this early. It's just completely thrown me. As soon as I saw you put up the Hunter Chase, I thought, "Good God, what is going on here?"
So I put out the right name for you, Max. I didn't want you to get into trouble, but I will forever call it the Fox Hunters because that's what it is. Okay,
Such an anorak.
utter woke nonsense.
Yeah.
But we're not allowed to call it the Fox Hunters anymore. There are no foxes at Cheltenham. Get over it. It's fine. That's just what it's called. So it will forever be known as the Fox Hunters. There was a horse that I can just see him outrunning his odds in this race. So, used to be trained by good old Dan Skelton back in the day. He actually finished third in the 2020 Triumph Hurdle. Was a Grade 1 winning hurdler back then, and won a couple of graded races. In fact, he won a Grade 1 over fences. Back in his early days. His last race for down was back in January 2023, and then he's had obviously some injury problems, had a bit of a break, but he's come back this season for James Owen and started off over hurdles, didn't do brilliantly, but then they decided to switch him to a Hunter Chase campaign, and he's just absolutely bolted up in a couple of Hunter Chases, most recently at Higham Point to Point a couple of weeks ago, and I just think this horse has got stamina for days, and he's run okay around Cheltenham before. As Duncan rightly says, it's not sort of a race you'd be kind of getting stuck into at this stage, but I just want to mention him because I think around 20 to 1 I think you can get anti-post. I think that's worth an each way bet, and I wouldn't want to say it after the time, so I'm going to say it now. All Mankind, Hunter Chase.
Yeah, because he'll be like, I was on that one. Yeah, didn't tell anyone, but I was on it. That's classic L.
All I get now is I'm not allowed to win bets anymore, unless I tell everybody every single bet I'm ever going to have.
Correct.
So that's what
Correct. Agreed. Just one last question before we wrap up. Then I was thinking when you were talking about sort of the ground and everything. When do we start thinking about the ground? Now, obviously, it's way too far. Based on the British weather, can change overnight. But the forecast for next week, I think, is pretty dry. So that's 1 week gone, and then you've got 1 week left. So obviously it could rain a lot, so that might throw out the window. But do we have to think about that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, mate, I think it's a really good question. Yeah, I think you probably want to know which horses want extremes, because most horses will go on most ground most of the time, kind of basically. It's not, horses don't just fit into good ground or soft ground completely. It's not just two camps.
It's the edge, I guess, you're looking at.
It's the edges. So if you know a horse, just as soon as it turns a little bit soft, it just completely underperforms, or vice versa, needs absolute bottomless ground to show its best. And the problem is most of the winter where the races are run is on pretty heavy ground. You can see some turnarounds when horses that really have been waiting all season for the better ground all of a sudden get it at Cheltenham, but tends to be more like the Aintree. Then you need to factor that in. But I would say now's probably, it's worth having a look, but I'd say given how changeable the British weather is, middle of next week, when you start to get to be a week out and we have a bit more confidence in the forecast. The problem is, if there's no rain, they will water.
So as a minimum, it'll probably be good.
Good to soft.
Good to soft.
Minimum
good to soft. Yeah, okay. Because when you're talking last week, so if you haven't seen last week's, go and see it. It's the day 1, day 2. And we talk about the champion hurdle where you're talking about the big 4. So what was that? Lossiemouth, Brightest Days Ahead, Institution Hill, and Burdetts Road?
Oh, nearly, mate. State Man.
Well, that could be something that makes a difference, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%. So it's definitely worth factoring in. I wouldn't obsess about it too far out because it could change. Maybe a week out, then start to see where it's heading and go from there.
All right. Cool. Thanks, guys. That's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in. Please let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover, what you're liking, and your constructive comments would be useful. And please please subscribe and share these with your friends, your family, and anyone that would like it. Do message us on social media or tailedoffpod@gmail.com. Until next time, have fun, race smart out there, and try not to be tailed off. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Position. Annie Power at the last race down. Annie Power has gone, but in front of the last length. Melody Light
By the far side, they're running up towards the finish, and he's mistaken the winning post. He's mistaken the winning post completely, Roger Lockwood.